Let's see. What would you like to know about me so that I can introduce myself? I got my first cat when I was 6. And the first cat that ever showed up in my life literally came in through the den. I didn't pick the cat picked me. Well, picked my family. And it was a white cat named Tinkerbell. I gave the cat the name. Tells you what I was watching with Disney at the time. So that's probably something that many of you who've met me many times didn't know about me. The other part of me is I've been in this teaching for, I think, over 20 years now, and came to it through a long journey of self-discovery combined with a long examination of a whole bunch of different faith practices, all of which I think are pretty remarkable. I just so happen to resonate with this one. It's the one that just keeps me intellectually captivated. I never seem to get bored with it because my mind is so busy trying to make it something else. And so it keeps my mind on the straight and narrow, and that's why I love this. So I think it's a great one for creative people and a great one for creative minds, because we can go all kinds of places. So this talk today is about positive thinking. And I want to talk about it because it is sort of the heart and soul of what our teaching is, but it's also one of those really, really tricky things to get our mind around, because sometimes it just sounds like it's meaningless. It sounds like a bunch of surface conversation. Oh yeah, just do some positive thinking and your life will be better. Oh yeah, that'll be fine. And what's your problem? Why can't you do more positive thinking? And then where do you go with that kind of conversation? You start beating yourself up and now you're not positive thinking, right? So it's a tricky kind of conversation to have, and yet it's super important for us to be able to recognize that that infinite power that is the positive thought that's within us is actually us using that God consciousness. So it is infinite, it's accessible, it's real, and as we use it consciously, we get to have the effect, the experience of what it is expanding in our lives. So there's a quote from Ernest Holmes, and he says, "We should be able to look at a wrong condition with the knowledge that we can change it." We look at a wrong condition, so you think about it. We've already determined in our human mind that there's something wrong, so we've made a judgment about it, and we need to be able to look at it, recognize it for what it is, not go into denial, recognize it for what it is, and then work about changing it. So there's a lot of empowerment in there. We're not victims to anything. We're in a place of being able to be at choice and in power with whatever it is that is happening. So it may look like we can't change our circumstance, but what we can do is we can start to work on how we choose to respond to the circumstance that we're in. I know from my own experience that when I respond from a place of victim, I get to have more and more victim. I get to have a nice, really uncomfortable downward spiral that keeps going and going and going, and it's amazing, really, how far down it can go. It is, interestingly, seemingly equally as infinite as it is to make the choice to spiral up. But the choice to spiral up is much more challenging because the world loves to have us on this merry-go-round of going downward. It loves to have us talk about our miseries. It loves to have us explain why we can't do anything about X, Y, Z, whatever it happens to be. It's just thrilled with that. And we get to meet other people that are in similar circumstances. And then we get to be, oh, you have that too. And I've heard people, and I'll put my hand up. I know I've been one of them. I'll put my hand up for sure, where I can even get kind of oddly, positively excited, like my voice will get excited, and it sounds like I'm having fun, about things that are negative. Isn't that a bit weird? was talking to somebody this week who found out that they had, quite likely a cancerous tumor in their lung. And as I was talking with this person about it, trying to sort of move towards the positive, what ended up happening was hearing really a lot of excitement and enthusiasm about the next medical appointment. But it wasn't because I get more clarity, it was because I'm in a state of misery. See how bad my life is? And now I've got all these people who are willing to help me because my life is really bad. And isn't it great that there's all these people, but my life is really bad? And I'm kind of going, okay, can we kind of take out the life is really bad part and just focus on all the people that are there to support you, all of the services that are there to support you. So there was this interesting energy that was constantly or continually bumping up against the negative, right? So there's the negative and the positive happening at the same time. Now, granted, we're going to be in a place of fear, and I've been in that place of fear too, so it's really easy, especially with bodily conditions, right, to get into that place where we feel like we're a victim to our body. But our mind is far more powerful. And if we can start to sort of work on that, we can start to open up to a place of receptivity and have a greater experience. So now, instead of being in a place of being in closed consciousness when we go into that medical appointment, we come into a place that's saying, my body, 90% of it is functioning at its highest and its best. It is functioning in absolute perfection. But I got 10% here that needs a little bit of help. Can you help me with that? And now we're in a slightly different state of consciousness. Can you kind of hear the energetic that's a little bit different there? So it's not a denial, it's just let's shift the perspective a little from where we are to where we could be. Where we are to where we could be. And so this is the same kind of thing that we can do in so many different areas of our lives. We can do it with our health, we can do it with our relationships, we can do it at any point in our existence, with anything that's going on in our life. So this is what we call spiritual mind treatment, is how we do that. And you've had a few examples of that. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that, because it's a nice stepped system that you can memorize for moments when things look like they're not working the way they should be, and to try and get you to shift that energy and move into something that's different. So there's another thing that we can do as well, which is more around the idea of this month being collaboration and communication. So we're not just looking at what's going on for ourselves, which is really important. We're also looking at what's going on when we're in relationship with other people. So sometimes we're in situations where, work maybe isn't going quite the way we want it to. Something else, we're in conversation with somebody and there's some kind of clash going on, or somebody that we know is having some challenges, and how do we want to work on that? And so there's another line of thinking, and this is also about asking questions, and it's called appreciative inquiry. Appreciative inquiry. And so there's actually an institute, and I believe they're based out of the United States, but they have places all over the world, and they specialize in this transpersonal psychology approach called appreciative inquiry. And it's interesting that as you go through what they're talking about, it mirrors what we do. So what I find so fascinating about this teaching is that it may go back, say, 100 years, but we call it ancient wisdom in some ways, because you can hear the same stuff if you look for it in all kinds of teachings everywhere. So all that's happening really is that science is catching up with what spirituality has already known. So now we're able to quantify things. We're able to do studies, and we can say, we're not just zooming you, it actually is making a difference. So this is called appreciative inquiry. And so what this does is it sort of, I'm sorry, my contact lenses, they keep doing weird things where they fog up. So I have to put my arms out here. They're supposed to be progressive, but I'm not feeling progressive at the moment. So what they do is they say, we want to take ourselves beyond what we already think we know. So say, for instance, you're working with somebody and they say to you, you know, I'm working on this business project, and I know I want to get to this benchmark over here, but I have no idea how I'm going to get there. They're stuck. So they're in a let's call it somewhat negative point of view because they're not feeling optimistic about it. So it's very simple, no real attachment to what's going on, right? So in this example, they're in a situation work-wise where they're stuck and they're talking to me about it. But from a inquisitive or appreciative inquiry point of view, this idea of I have no idea what to do, what we can start to do is pull back from that and say, but something does have an idea. What if you let go of the idea that you had no idea and now start asking yourself, what could that look like? What could that look like? So I have no idea. And then as soon as you start saying, what could that look like? And look is an important word because we start to visualize things. The mind just starts to fill in the gaps. Maybe not immediately, but slowly it starts to fill in with different pictures and different ideas. So in what we often talk about is visioning. And it's one of our key practices is visioning. And the reason why is because when we start to vision about something, we give ourselves permission to have a bigger idea. Instead of having a small container, we say, what if I put this into a bigger container? What would it look like then? What would it look like then if I had a bigger container? And maybe that container isn't big enough, so let's see if I get an even bigger container. What would that look like? So we start asking those questions, and slowly, 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 different pictures will come to mind. So visioning really is something that starts to rewire our brain, essentially. It starts to rewire our brain to seek out and try and find what those different pieces are so that we can actually begin to activate that instead of the opposite. And that way we can start building on those pieces and start moving ourselves forward. So if we're in a place where, say for instance, we've got the health challenge, what would it look like if I celebrated the health that I do have? What would that look like? Do I find the moment I start to think about that I feel a little bit more relaxed? Do I find that I maybe treat my body and ingest healthier food because I'm happy that my body feels better and I'm aware of that? And so now I'm feeding my body with more food. I'm maybe drinking a little bit more water because I'm appreciating the body that I have. And if you think about that, it isn't long before you start to see maybe there's a little turn that starts to take place about my relationship with my body, and I start to have a different experience of that. So just bear with me for a second here while I look at this thing. So the connecting points really are where we want to make sure when we're in conversation with other people, we want to make sure that we're talking to them heart to heart. So we're trying to listen a little bit more deeply, trying to listen to what it is they're actually saying versus what the words are at the surface, and trying to help get into what they really are looking for. So if somebody is in a place of limitation in whatever kind of way, what are they really looking for? So if, say for instance, they're looking for a home and they say, there's no, the rental situation is atrocious out there. I can't find anywhere to live. I was just talking to somebody in the group actually here, and this is one idea that's come to me many times, is some people are getting a new idea about what living together looks like. They're getting new ideas about what it means to live in community. We let go of that idea of the multi-generational household in North America because we had so much land. We could just build house after house after house, and everybody had their own little house. And then we got so attracted to this idea of having our own space that we even started to segregate according to demographics. So I don't know if you remember that, but in the 1980s, 1990s, we said, you can only live here if you're over 55. So we had segregated places, and now generations aren't even speaking to each other. And if you had a grandchild, your grandchild wasn't allowed to show up at the 55 plus place that you lived in because, that was the rule. It's interesting, right? So now we're in a whole new place. And now people are starting to say, what would happen if I shared a space? What would happen if there were 5 of us that got together and got a mortgage? What would happen if, instead of me being an elderly person, feeling isolated and dying on my own, facing that, what would happen if 6 or 8 of us got together, lived in a house, and hired somebody to take care of all of us? What would happen with that? A bigger idea starting to be birthed out of possibility as opposed to out of limitation. So yes, it doesn't look like what it used to look like. But you know what? Nothing looks like what it used to look like. I don't look like what I looked like when I was 3. I'm a lot taller. Not much, maybe, but, a little taller. And, my voice is probably a little bit lower. And, and I'm not going to look the same in 20 years from now. And my living circumstances are not the same. And what's going on in my head is not the same. Some people say that every single cell, and I say some people say, but I think this is a scientific truth, every single cell in our body is completely different every single 7 years. So if you think about that, you are biologically a new person every 7 years. And you've probably also heard that people talk about allergies, and they say that they run in 7-year cycles, regardless of whether you're getting, allergy treatments. Well, isn't that interesting? Allergies run in 7-year cycles. And my body changes every 7 years. Interesting, maybe connected. I think maybe good chance, I don't know. But we're reacting. We evolve, we interact and intersect with the environment that we're in. And our consciousness is constantly doing that. And sometimes old thinking habits are hard to get rid of, even if our experience is calling for us to have a new thinking habit. So again, we go back to that idea of, do we want to be in that spiral that goes all the way down, or do we want to start actively using our minds to be that creative, expressive spark that can go somewhere else? So we can support each other in community. We can support each other by listening for what we really want. So the person that says, I can't find a house, it's too expensive, it's too this, it's too that, I'm stuck, blah, blah, blah. What would you like? What would you really like? What would meet the needs and the desires that you have right now? Instead of looking at what you can't have, start looking at what you could have. And the answer might not show up right away, might take a while. It'll take however long it takes. But the movement in our thinking towards that allows more people to hear us. So now when we're having our conversations out in the bigger world, we're saying, I'm so excited because I've got this brand new idea about the kind of house that I want to live in. I don't like where I'm living right now, and I'm ready to let go of it. But I could be living in a place that looks like this. I feel that, and I really would like that, and that could be really great for me. And somebody, all of a sudden, you're talking about it that way. Gee, you know what? I never realized this, but this person that I work with, they said that they're looking for a new roommate, and all I've ever heard is that that place is amazing. Would you have got that response if you'd said, oh, my life is really crappy? Probably not, because they wouldn't necessarily want to recommend you to join that amazing house. We don't know what is around us until we start expressing ourselves from our highest and our best place. And then we can start having that experience. And yeah, like I say, I'm not saying it's going to show up tomorrow. But the tendency of our belief, the tendency of our behavior, the tendency of our actions will always be moving upwards if we're conscious of what it is that we're communicating. So I want to go back to this appreciative inquiry just for a moment. And they have a couple of very specific steps. So the first one is to choose the positive as the focus of inquiry. So we've kind of talked a little bit about that. And then the second part is to go a little bit deeper if you're in conversation with somebody who's having a difficult time. Once you've isolated out, well, what is the positive? Say, when was the last time you felt like your world rocked? Whatever that is, doesn't matter. What was going on then? What was it that made that a peak experience for you? Now we're starting to figure out what character the individual has, what makes them tick. A peak experience for me isn't going to be the same peak experience for you. But we want to figure out what is it that's going to be a peak experience so that people can start remembering what that felt like and embody what that feeling is. So they can say, yes, actually, I was doing a lot of reading, or maybe I was in school, or maybe something else was happening. Well, what was it about school that was so interesting? Well, I had this professor, or I read this book, or there was this new idea, whatever it happened to be. Or I was just rocking it at the gym, and I was eating so well, and I felt really good, and I never stopped doing that. And then I don't know why I stopped doing that, but for some reason I did. Maybe I should start doing that again. I wonder if my body would like that. Maybe I should start reading books that intrigue me and challenge me intellectually. Who knows what the answer is? But ask to see that. So these are questions we can ask ourselves, but they're also questions we can ask anybody that we're trying to help to elevate. So then the next one they talk about is share the stories and identify life-giving forces. I love that, life-giving forces. So here what we talk about is we try and recognize the qualities of what we call the absolute, or the qualities of God, whatever name you want to call that, energy, whatever it is. And that too, so what is it? Is it strength? What's the force behind this peak experience that you had that's really making you go, that's what I'm connecting with? So there's a story, and then what's the heart of that story? What's that one part that's inside there that makes you go, yes, that's what's speaking to me? And again, you get another deeper level of understanding about who you are, the individual that you're speaking. If you're talking for yourself, a deeper understanding of who you are. If you're helping somebody else, they get a deeper understanding of who they are. And they start connecting with that. And then the last one, after you do all that, is where you get back to the visioning process. So you go through that whole exercise, and then you encourage them, or encourage yourself, right, to start to vision, to dream, pay attention to what shows up in your dreams, to imagine, and again to try and embody whatever that thing is. So you can start to identify with the higher part of yourself that's actually asking to be called out. When we're in our downward spiral, it's actually a call for something bigger. We wouldn't be going in that downward spiral if we hadn't taken some crazy step off somewhere. I know for me, I had a long period with depression. I was on antidepressants for 10 years. And what happened was I kept telling myself, I'm really depressed. And I can't get out of it. And so what did I get? I'm really depressed, and I can't get out of it. And then I went to cognitive behavioral therapy. But I didn't do cognitive behavioral therapy on its own. I did spiritual cognitive behavioral therapy, which was coming here, coming to a version of here, right? Because that had an even bigger idea. I knew my small self was only able to do so much, but there was a part of me that had a bigger self that was able to do that much more. And the more I started to see what that bigger self was, the more I realized there was a really obvious reason why I was depressed, which was I wasn't doing what I wanted to do. It's that simple. I wasn't living the life that I wanted to live. Somewhere down the road, I bought into somebody else's idea of what I thought my life needed to be. And it really wasn't working for me. And I had to kind of fish and cut bait. And that fish and cut bait stage is really challenging. And it's scary because you're letting go, right? You're letting go of whatever structure you had and going, okay, I'm going to trust and step into something new. But what was the alternative? I kept doing the same thing. That wasn't working. So there was no alternative. So I let it get bad enough that there really was no alternative, and then I started to change. So it took longer, right? Because I'd let things get so difficult. But if we allow ourselves to catch our mind and make these inquiry steps, either for the people that we're trying to assist or ourselves, we can catch those moments so much quicker so that we can start to shift stuff. So my day, halfway through my day, maybe my day's not going that great. Oh, my day's not going that great. What's going on? Why is my day not going that great? Oh, I'll tell you some of my things. I haven't had any water for hours and hours and hours, not anything to drink. Or, you know what? I've stared at a computer screen nonstop for 5 hours. No wonder I'm feeling a little not with it. I haven't had any fresh air. I didn't move my body, right? Who knows what yours might be, but I'm just giving you some of my versions, right? But invariably, there's something that I've been doing that has worked for a period of time, and then maybe I did it too long. And so now I bring myself back to a new awareness, go walk the dog, have a glass of water, come back, regroup, or maybe just do something completely different and move on. Read something. Put a new idea in our mind. Something positive. Think something positive. Favorite quote, remember to breathe. That's another favorite one of mine. Oh, I haven't been breathing. I've been doing this. Tiny little shallow breathing things. Did I take a deep breath for 5 hours? Apparently not. Not one. How did I do that? My body has no oxygen. So there's those kinds of things to think about. So here's where the connection is between spiritual mind treatment and this. What we do here as a teaching before we ever do any spiritual mind treatment is we really do ask these kinds of questions. What is your mental equivalent? What is your best possible scenario that you would like to have? What do you want to happen? And then we work on what we want as opposed to what we don't want so that we can continue to move ourselves towards that experience. So I want to just close here with a little treatment, again, another one. So I'm going to just tell you the steps because I want you to listen to it in a different kind of way than you've listened to the other ones. You can still take it in as a treatment for you, but I want you to hear it in terms of the levels that it goes into. So the first part is really recognizing the bigger idea. And then we go into recognizing all of the ways that we are connected, so that's the unification. But it's the middle step that is the most important, and we call that the realization step. So what do I want to realize in my life? And once we figure out that whole realization step, which is more like an expanded affirmative prayer, then we can say thank you for that, and then we can release it and say abracadabra. So that's basically what it is. So this particular one is written by a guy named Raymond Charles Barker. I think he's brilliant because he uses really nice, plain language, doesn't get airy-fairy, super grounded, and really impactful, I think. He takes his stuff seriously. So today, law and order, law being the law of attraction, the law of the way things work. Today, law and order are the basis of my living. I refuse to believe that I can be the victim of circumstances. Nothing can happen to me that is not caused by me. I now dedicate my thinking to the perfect ideas of the Spirit, and I do not set up any disorderly causes which will produce disorderly effects. I live in God. I live in God. I think with the mind of God. I am secure in the divine protection of an unfailing presence and an unlimited power. I give orderly thinking to my world and receive orderly results from my world. My knowledge of the trust has set me free from the confusions of false thinking. I know that only good will happen to me today. And so it is. He is solid. So that's what I wanted to share with you today. And I have one last suggestion. This is a little bit of a story, a picture that I'm going to put in your mind. This was a project that we did in class. And we had, I think there's 6 students, some of them are here today, and we had you could use poker chips, you could use pennies, if you can find any. You could use whatever you want, pieces of paper, doesn't matter. And you can play this with a friend if you like. And everybody in the group, you can do this with all of your friends if you like. They sit around and everybody gets 10 chips and you talk about whatever it is that you're working on. Talk with your friends about whatever it is that you're working on. And the moment, and you have to have an agreement on this because we don't call anybody out without agreement. The moment someone else or yourself says anything that is not supportive of what it is you've asked for, you lose one of your 10. They're gone. Now you're down to 9 pennies because you just spent one. You wasted it on negative thinking. So it's a way of creating a visualization of how we are speaking, how we are sharing our ideas with others. And so if you have somebody that you consider to be safe, or you can even practice it here, you can come up to somebody and say, would you practice this with me? And ask them. You need agreement because you don't want to take stuff away from people and punish them for their words. You both have to be on the same page and be willing to be called out, right? Otherwise, it's not going to work. So there's a trust element in there. But see what happens. Pick something maybe easy to start with that's just like one of those little things and see if you can figure out what you can do with that. And then see how far you can take yourself and see where you trip up. Thank you so much.